It's funny, isn't it? We always hear about charisma like it's some sort of magic, something you're born with.
Right.
Like some people just have it and some people don't. But then you hear these stories. Like, have you heard that thing about Marilyn Monroe on the subway?
No, I haven't. What's that?
Apparently, she could turn her charisma on and off just by changing how she stood and what she was focused on.
Really?
Yeah, like 1 minute she'd just blend in, totally invisible, and the next, boom, she's Marilyn Monroe, captivating everyone around her.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. It just makes you wonder, right? Is there something we can actually learn from this? Like, is there a method to the magic?
That's exactly the question we're going to dive into in this deep dive.
Okay, awesome.
We're going to look at charisma not as this, mysterious gift that some people just magically have, but as a set of behaviors.
Okay.
Behaviors that we can understand and even potentially learn ourselves.
Interesting.
And we're going to be drawing from the charisma myth and some other resources that you've provided.
Awesome. So for listeners, it's like we're giving you the cheat sheet.
Exactly.
To cut through all the noise and tell you what's really important when it comes to charisma, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not just about first impressions.
No, it's not.
It can have a real impact on how people perceive you and how you can influence things in the world.
Right. It can make a big difference in your life.
Yeah. For example, there's this story about William Gladstone and Benjamin Disraeli.
Okay.
They were both vying to be prime minister back in the 1880s.
Oh, wow.
And there's this young woman who had the opportunity to have dinner with both of them, right?
Okay.
And she said that after spending an evening with Gladstone, she felt like he was the most intelligent man in all of England.
Wow. That's impressive.
But then, after dinner with Disraeli, she felt like she was the most intelligent person in all of England.
Right.
And guess what? Disraeli ended up winning that power struggle.
Interesting. So it's not just about, being smart or powerful yourself. It's about making the other person feel good.
Exactly.
Making them feel valued.
And that's really at the core of charisma, right? Making that connection.
Right. Absolutely. And the charisma myth, the book we mentioned, breaks down the key elements of charisma into 3 core components: presence, power, which is also sometimes called influence, and then warmth, which you can also think of as affability.
Okay, so presence, power, and warmth.
Got it. Those are the foundational pieces that we're going to be looking at.
So let's start with presence. What exactly does it mean to be present, in a way that really draws people in?
Well, the book defines presence as simply awareness of what is happening in each moment.
Okay.
So it's about being fully focused on the here and now.
Right.
It's not letting your mind get distracted by, your to-do list.
Right.
Worries about the future or, emails you need to send.
Yeah.
But it's really tough to fake presence because our bodies are surprisingly bad liars.
Okay.
Even tiny little movements in our facial muscles, micro expressions that last just milliseconds.
Huh.
Like as short as 17 milliseconds.
Wow, that's quick.
Yeah. And those little things can reveal that we're not truly engaged with the person we're talking to.
Yeah.
And people pick up on those cues, often subconsciously, without even realizing it.
I've definitely been in those conversations. You're talking to someone and you can tell they're not really listening.
Right.
Their eyes are darting around the room or they keep checking their phone.
Exactly.
It just makes you feel like, you're not important.
Right. It makes you feel like your thoughts and your feelings don't matter.
Exactly.
And one of the resources you shared, there's a quote from a Harvard student, and it really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
They said that when someone's not fully present, they just feel unimportant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's almost like their thoughts and their concerns are just less significant than whatever else is on the other person's mind.
Right. And in today's world, where everyone's constantly multitasking, true presence is becoming even more rare.
Right. And that's why it's so impactful.
Okay. So if we want to be more charismatic, we need to work on being more present.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that? How do we train ourselves to be more in the moment?
Well, the charisma myth has this really helpful exercise called the presence exercise.
Okay, I'm listening.
So take a minute, close your eyes, and focus all of your attention on just one of 3 things.
Okay.
The sounds around you.
Okay.
The sensation of your breath.
Okay.
Or the feeling in your toes.
Okay.
Each one of these has a slightly different effect.
Oh, interesting.
Focusing on the external sounds around you can help you become more receptive to your environment.
Okay.
Tuning into your breath really anchors you in the physical reality of the present moment. And focusing on your toes brings awareness down through your body and helps ground you.
So like in just 1 minute, you can start rewiring your focus and showing other people that they really have your undivided attention.
Right, which is one of the most important things you can do to build that charismatic connection.
Okay. So we've got a 1-minute exercise. Sounds pretty doable, right? Focus on the sounds, your breath, or your toes. But, I've got to ask, why is it so difficult for us to stay focused in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like, our minds seem to wander all the time.
They do. And part of it is just how our brains are wired.
Okay.
They're naturally drawn to novelty.
Right.
You think back to our ancestors, like being alert to new sounds, new sights, could have meant the difference between life or death.
Right. Yeah.
So that hardwiring is still with us.
Okay.
Plus, modern life just encourages this kind of like continuous partial attention.
What's that?
It's where we're constantly juggling multiple tasks, like checking our phones, emails,
Right.
Our focus is kind of spread thin instead of deeply engaged.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a study at Harvard, and they found that people are mind-wandering nearly 47% of the time.
Almost half the time. That's a lot.
It is. But here's the good news. Because genuine presence is so rare these days, even just like small improvements in your ability to be present can have a huge impact.
Interesting. So even if we're not perfect at it, just making an effort can really make a difference.
Exactly.
Okay. So what's a practical way that we can bring more presence into our daily conversations?
There's a simple self-check that you can do during a conversation.
Okay.
Just periodically ask yourself, where's my mind right now?
Okay.
And if you notice that your thoughts have drifted, maybe you're already thinking about what you're going to say next, instead of really listening.
Right.
Gently bring your focus back to the other person.
Okay.
Even if it's for a brief moment, focus on your breath.
Right.
Focus on the feeling in your feet, anything to kind of re-anchor you in the present. And there was someone who tried this, and they said that they just felt more relaxed in conversations.
Oh, wow.
And they noticed that people were responding to them with more warmth, more smiles, even when the conversations weren't like super important or anything.
So it's not just about the words we're saying, it's about the energy behind them.
Exactly. It's about the attention we're giving.
Okay. So we've covered presence. Now let's move on to the other two elements of charisma, power and warmth. How do those fit into the picture?
These are the two primary dimensions that we use to judge other people, often very quickly.
Okay.
When we first meet someone, we're instantly trying to answer these two questions.
Okay.
Does this person have the ability to influence things?
Okay.
To make things happen? That's power.
Right.
And is this person well-intentioned towards me? Do they care? And that's warmth.
Okay. So power is about influence and warmth is about like good intentions.
Exactly.
And we're making these judgments all the time, right? Without even realizing it.
All the time.
Yeah.
And we're using a lot of different cues to make those snap decisions.
Like what?
Like someone's appearance, how other people react to them, and crucially, their body language.
Okay.
So both power and warmth individually can contribute to charisma.
Okay.
But it's when you can combine both effectively. That's when you see the most magnetic individuals.
Okay. So give us some examples. Like how does power show up? How does warmth show up?
Sure. Power can show up as intellectual strength.
Okay.
Think of someone like Bill Gates.
Right.
Or it can be a quiet confidence and conviction.
Okay.
Now, historically, power was often shown through physical dominance.
Right.
But in today's world, intelligence, expertise, and social standing often carry more weight.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, warmth is typically conveyed through friendly facial expressions, open body language,
Right. Okay.
showing genuine empathy and a sincere interest in other people.
Right. So you might think of someone like the Dalai Lama. Okay. So we've got these two elements, power and warmth. But it seems like it could be tricky to project both of those at the same time.
You're right. It can be a delicate balance.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why people who can do it effectively are so influential. Think of it almost like our cravings for things that were scarce in the past, but essential for survival.
Okay.
Our ancestors needed resources like food and shelter to survive.
Right.
And those resources are linked to power.
Okay.
But they also needed social connection to thrive.
Right. To cooperate, to stay safe.
Exactly. And that's linked to warmth.
So we're kind of hardwired to respond to these signals.
Exactly. We have these strong responses to cues of power and warmth because they're deeply ingrained in us.
Okay. So what happens if someone's like strong on one element but not the other?
Well, someone who projects power without warmth might come across as competent, but also arrogant or cold, even intimidating.
Right, right.
On the flip side, someone who's very warm but lacks a sense of power might be seen as likable, but not taken seriously, or maybe even seen as a pushover.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this takes us right back to our Gladstone and Disraeli example, right?
It does.
It sounds like Gladstone had the power thing down, but maybe he wasn't so great on the warmth side.
That's a good observation.
Yeah.
Gladstone was brilliant. He held a position of authority, so he definitely projected power.
Right.
But it seems like his interaction style didn't necessarily make people feel valued or important.
Yeah.
Disraeli, on the other hand, had that same level of influence.
Okay.
But he combined it with genuine warmth and presence, which made people feel good about themselves.
Okay.
So it was that combination of power, warmth, and presence
that
likely contributed to his success.
Okay. And this all really underscores the importance of how we communicate non-verbally.
Absolutely.
You know, you mentioned a study earlier that really blew my mind.
Oh, yeah. The one from MIT.
Yeah.
The Media Lab there did this fascinating study.
Yeah.
Where they found they could predict the success of negotiations and business pitches.
Okay.
With 87% accuracy just by analyzing people's body language.
87%? That's incredible. Just from body language.
Just body language. They didn't even listen to what the people were saying.
Wow.
That's how powerful nonverbal communication is.
So we're constantly sending out signals without even realizing it.
We are. And if you think about our evolutionary history, it makes sense.
Okay.
Language is actually a relatively recent development for humans.
Right.
For most of our history, we relied entirely on nonverbal cues to communicate.
Okay.
Our intentions, our emotions, our social status, it was all conveyed through body language.
So we've got this deep, ancient understanding of body language that's still a part of us.
Exactly.
And that means that having effective body language that signals presence, power, and warmth is often more important than the actual words we're saying.
It can be much more powerful.
Okay. So our bodies are basically like walking billboards, constantly broadcasting messages.
That's a great way to put it.
So what are the key takeaways here when it comes to developing charisma?
I'd say there are two really important insights.
Okay.
The first is that because so much of our body language is unconscious, we can't really micromanage it.
Okay.
You know, trying to consciously control every gesture, every facial expression, it's just not going to work.
Right.
It's overwhelming and it ends up feeling inauthentic.
Yeah.
The second insight, and this is a really important one, is that our body language is a direct reflection of our inner state.
Okay.
Our feelings, our beliefs, our confidence level.
Right.
And that's true whether we're trying to hide it or not. So you brought up micro-expressions earlier.
Great.
And these are a perfect example.
Okay.
Because even if we're consciously trying to project a certain image, any inconsistencies between that outward display and our true inner state can leak out through these little micro-expressions.
Yeah.
So think about the difference between a genuine smile, where your eyes crinkle up, and a fake smile that only involves your mouth.
Right.
People are really good at picking up on those subtle differences.
Yeah. Even if they don't consciously realize it, it just feels off.
Exactly. It creates a sense of unease or distrust.
Right.
Because that primary expression doesn't align with those little flashes of true feeling.
So if our body language is such a strong reflection of what's going on inside, does that mean that working on our inner state is the key to becoming more charismatic?
Exactly.
Okay.
The charisma myth really emphasizes that genuine charismatic behavior comes from cultivating the right inner state.
Okay.
So trying to just mimic charismatic body language without having the corresponding internal feelings will eventually backfire.
Okay.
It's going to feel inauthentic, and those little nonverbal cues will betray you.
Yeah.
So the focus needs to shift to developing those internal qualities.
Okay.
Confidence, empathy, focused attention. Because those are the things that naturally give rise to charismatic body language.
So it's less about learning a bunch of tricks and more about creating a real internal shift.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book talks about how a lot of people, especially people in leadership roles, come to charisma training.
Okay.
Looking for those superficial techniques to influence others.
Right.
But the real breakthrough comes when they start focusing on managing their own internal states.
Okay.
You know, their anxieties, their self-doubt.
Right.
So they can project confidence and connection even in difficult situations.
Okay.
And one of the tools they use in the book is this self-assessment framework.
Okay.
That looks at professional skills, external social skills, and then internal capabilities.
Okay.
And they find that a lot of people are really strong on the first two.
Okay.
But it's the truly charismatic individuals who have really developed those internal skills.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. You know, like that old saying, knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment. It's from Lao Tzu.
Okay.
And it really highlights the importance of self-awareness in developing charisma.
So we've talked a lot about cultivating those inner states, right?
Right.
But is there like a shortcut?
Well, there's a really interesting principle that might surprise you.
Okay.
And it has to do with how our minds work.
Okay.
So the human mind doesn't actually distinguish perfectly between what's real and what's imagined.
What do you mean?
Okay. So have you ever, like, watched a scary movie and felt your heart racing?
Oh, yeah.
Even though you know you're safe on your couch.
Right, right.
Or try this. Imagine, like, the sensation of scraping your fingernails on a chalkboard.
Oh, okay, I'm cringing already.
Or, like, holding a handful of sand or biting into a lemon.
Okay, I get it.
So your body's responding as if those things were actually happening.
Right.
Even though there's no real threat from the movie, no chalkboard, no sand, no lemon.
Yeah, that's true.
So your brain's processing those vivid mental simulations as if they were real experiences.
Interesting. So how do we use that to our advantage?
Well, this means that if you can consciously cultivate a charismatic mental state.
Oh, okay.
Like, imagine yourself feeling confident, warm, and fully present.
Right.
Your body will actually start to respond accordingly.
Wow, that's really interesting.
And this principle is behind a lot of effective techniques for boosting charisma.
Okay. You know, this makes me think of the placebo effect.
It's a great example.
Yeah. It's like when people take a sugar pill, but they believe it's medicine,
right,
and they actually start to feel better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the placebo effect shows just how powerful the mind-body connection is.
Yeah.
You know, the impact of placebos was first really observed during World War I.
Okay. When
they were using them because there was a shortage of pain medication.
Wow.
And then it's been studied more and more since the 1950s.
Okay.
And it's just this clear example of how belief can shape reality.
Right. Right.
And you shared a study about Ellen Langer's work at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
With elderly patients.
Yeah.
And they created this environment that was designed to evoke memories of their younger years.
Right, like they had them watch old movies and listen to music from their youth.
Exactly.
And the results were pretty incredible, right?
They were. The patients actually showed improvements in physical strength.
Wow.
Their posture even got better.
Really?
And even their cognitive function improved.
So our mental state can really have a physical impact.
It absolutely can.
Okay. So if our minds are so receptive to what we're thinking and imagining, how can we use this to become more charismatic?
Well, the placebo effect, and its kind of evil twin, the nocebo effect.
Okay. What's the nocebo effect?
That's where negative beliefs can lead to negative physical outcomes.
Oh, wow.
It really shows just how incredibly powerful the connection is between our minds and bodies.
Okay.
And in terms of charisma, it means that if we intentionally cultivate those charismatic inner states through things like visualization, positive self-talk, focusing on feelings of confidence and warmth, we can actually start to shape our body language and our overall impact on others from the inside out.
So our thoughts can actually become a catalyst for change in how we present ourselves to the world.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Can you give us a quick recap of the key takeaways for someone who wants to understand and maybe even develop their own charisma?
Absolutely. The core of charisma lies in the interplay of those three key elements.
Okay.
Presence, which is being fully engaged in the moment.
Right.
Power, the ability to influence things.
Okay.
And warmth, the ability to connect with other people.
Okay. And we've also learned about the importance of genuine presence.
Right.
How body language is a window into our inner state.
Exactly.
And the fascinating way our brains respond to the power of our imagination.
Absolutely.
So the real work of developing charisma starts from within.
It does.
It's not about putting on an act.
No.
It's about nurturing those inner qualities that naturally shine through.
You got it.
That's a really powerful idea. You know, it really makes you wonder. If our minds can't fully tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined, then what possibilities open up when we consciously start to shape our inner world?
Exciting question to think about.
Yeah, how might that change our daily interactions? How might that impact the world around us? It's definitely something to ponder long after this deep dive is over.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.